Okay, so this week, the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection finally arrived. Obviously, there'd been some controversy surrounding that in the run up to launch, simply because, well, when they're talking about PlayStation 2 games running at 1080p on a PlayStation 5 and Switch games running at half the frame rate of the original PS2 versions, that's slightly problematic. And I don't know what we can really say about this except to say, well, our fears have been confirmed. No review code actually came our way, just to make clear. So I've actually spent £150 on buying all of the versions of this particular thing, only to discover that, yes, our worst fears have been confirmed. I think there's two ways to look at this. There's a kind of document of older sort of Metal Gear Solid material. There does seem to be a lot of great bonus material in there, but the actual quality of the emulation of the games seems to be really disappointing. Tom's working on this now for content, and posting various things in the Slack channel which just look really, really bad.
Yeah.
John, do you want to take up the story here? What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, it is exactly what I feared, but actually slightly worse, I would say.
Okay.
Right. The thing that I was surprised, so despite their announcements, as I confirmed before from captured footage, it is 720p across the board. It's this. Right. Okay, in regards to Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, because and we'll talk about MGS 1 separately, but MGS 2 and 3, they're 720p on all platforms. I believe Bluepoint used MSAA on the 360 PS3 version.
Yep.
And you can tell because whatever they're doing in the Master Collection, the image quality is worse. There is significantly more shimmering and noise to the edges. And looking at straight, sort of slanted edges, you can see the coverage is so much worse in the new version. So not only is it still 720p, it's bad 720p, compared to the original. Right. It's actually worse. That's insane to me that happens. Furthermore, the Switch version, of course, still has it's all 30 frames per second for those two games. Somebody was digging. I think Metal Gear Solid 2 is actually, I think, derived from the Shield version, which wasn't great anyway.
But Metal Gear 3 isn't.
Metal Gear 3 isn't. And the way somebody theorized this is that there was a visual bug in a very specific part of Metal Gear Solid 2 that showed up in the HD collection. But it was fine in the Shield version, and the Switch version shares the same correct rendering of it as the Shield version.
But the other consoles don't.
The other consoles don't. They're broken. It's a very minor thing, but they have the same flaw as the PS3 360 version, which is fascinating to see. But so that's a bummer. Also, I mean, man, it is just confirmed to be, it's just a Unity shell that they built. I don't know how they ported these things over. It's pretty obvious that they just had Bluepoint's original works and they just kind of reworked them somehow to make them run on the new machines, rather than actually doing a proper update conversion kind of thing. Right. Obviously, unfortunately, Bluepoint was not able to work on this. I mean, they are Sony owned now, but I still feel like, I don't know, something could have, but I'm sure they're busy with their own projects, right? Going back to this would have been a ask, I think. I was thinking, I haven't seen the credits yet, and I hope it's not who did it, but I was thinking, what about Hexadrive? That would have been a good choice. Do you remember them? They did, they were the ones that reported Zone of the Enders 2 to PS3, because Konami released that very bad collection for Zone of the Enders from High Voltage Software, and then they had Hexadrive go in and patch the game by essentially redoing the entire port and making it much better. And that shares similar technology, I believe, as these other games. So that would have been an interesting choice for this. And I'm surprised that they didn't take that approach.
I mean, technically for all of these games, the real approach would be to decompile the code if you don't have it, and then make it native in every single way. If fans can do it, reverse engineering a game on the PC with none of the original source code for things like Metal Gear Solid or whatever, or any game, Perfect Dark is a recent one.
Exactly.
Then that is the real way to do it.
That's the real way, and they didn't do that.
That's the real way.
Interestingly, there was a mod to fix the resolution on PC within an hour or something after release. Although it does still have some issues with Metal Gear Solid 2 because there's a bunch of visual effects that that are essentially rendered within a 1280 by 720 window that Bluepoint went back and actually redid for their original remaster.
Wow.
But they haven't been touched up again, obviously. So what happens on PC, if you run in 4K, you get like a little box up here in the corner with the effect inside that small 720p box, and it doesn't apply to the rest of the screen.
So
it could
awesome.
probably be patched.
I think this could
Maybe.
be fixed by the modders. Konami's not going to patch it because, you know, it is like that. Also, things that occur to me, and this is not a big deal because it was like this on 360 already, but with the original HD collection, if you played it on PS3, you got the original pressure-sensitive button controls, if you recall, which is... So those games were designed to be played on the PS2 with the pressure-sensitive buttons, and there were specific actions like pulling out your weapon. Like, I actually think this worked great, but on PS2, you would hold square lightly. You just kind of hold it normally, and you pull out your weapon. If you let off of it lightly, it would actually put the weapon away. If you pressed it fierce and then let off, he would actually shoot it. And it ended up feeling really good, just as like pulling out your gun, aiming, and then either like popping off a shot or letting off. And they had to change that. I think it's like clicking in the sticks now to fix that.
That's a bit awkward.
It is possible. There's the PC port, which is hilarious. It has like no graphics options, really. It has like the most confounding controls. Like when I saw the control options in this thing, I was immediately reminded of Batman Forever, the DF Retro Let's Play that Audie and I did, where I had to pull out the manual and like investigate how to control the game. It looks like that. You're just like, how? Like, I understand it's a gamepad style game, yes, but come on. There has to be some work done to make this play okay on a keyboard and mouse. It's possible they could have.
It is 100% possible.
Like, come
I mean,
on.
like, oh my gosh, yeah.
So that part is bad. So there's just so many issues there with that. It's surprising and feels really lazy. That's probably the first time I would actually use the word lazy to describe something, right? Because I hate that word in regards to game development, and I'm sure there was still some challenges here, but this feels, maybe it's more of a budget issue. Maybe Konami just didn't give them the resources to actually do what needed to be done, and they just had to do a quick thing to get it out the door, but so that's still on them for that.
Yeah,
wow.
Absolutely. The problem is that, you know, ultimately these are some of the most important games, certainly in Konami's library.
Yeah, very beloved.
And the concept that they're just not going to treat them with respect is just simply unacceptable.
Call it the Master
I mean,
Collection.
you know, yeah, it's just astonishing. There's nothing masterful about this.
I will say though that so Metal Gear Solid 1, this is in an interesting position because this one seems to have been done actually by M2, which surprised me. And from what I can tell, the actual core emulation of it is perfectly fine. And it's like kind of a low spec thing where they're simply targeting delivering that original experience, right? There's no real enhancements to it. It's the original experience. There's just two flaws. Well, no, there's one major flaw is that it's just upscaled to a higher res from the original 240p and it's blurry. So it's just like a bilinear upscale. I don't know whether that's on M2 or if that's actually part of the wrapper, because if you recall, maybe you don't, when the Sonic Origins collection came out, that was running on Christian Whitehead and Crew's retro engine, right? But it was horribly bilinear filtered because of the Hedgehog engine shell around it. The way it presented those frames, it treated it like a texture surface and it just like applied filtering to it. So it was blurry and ugly, even though we know darn well that the actual underlying tech was good. And I'm wondering if that's the case here with the M2 port, where, because they've done PS1 emulation before and it doesn't have this problem in their other versions. It's just blurry and nasty looking when it should be sharp. But the bigger problem with Metal Gear Solid 1, I think, and if they really wanted to do a true collection, this is what they should have done. Optional Duck Station like features where essentially they fix the presentation issues of PlayStation. Texture, perspective correction. You could downsample to 240p or not, allow a high res mode as well, but downsampling to 240p, get a super clean look, super anti-aliased, fix all the texture warping issues. It could look real, like the art is so good. It looks awesome that way. They could have also if I were working on this collection, I would have pushed to have two other things. One, have a conversion of the PC version of Metal Gear Solid 1 just for fun.
Right.
Even though it is inferior, I would say it would be neat to see, I think. But more importantly, and this could be tricky because of Nintendo's involvement, I think Twin Snakes should have been in here. Whether people like it or not isn't important to me. I think it's just it's part of Metal Gear history. And I think it needed to be here as well to really complete this. And I really, really think it should have been. But unlike the Blue Point stuff and unlike, emulating PS1, Twin Snakes never got re-released. So they would have had to handle that situation, right? Either port it or emulate GameCube. And that presents its own problems. So I'm not surprised they didn't do it. But the whole thing just feels like a cash grab, very cheaply done. And it makes me so sad to see it because they could have, the potential was off the charts here for something truly definitive if they just done it right. And they just clearly didn't allocate the resources and the right teams to it to make that happen. And so, frankly, I don't recommend buying this. And honestly, if you have an Xbox, just get the HD collection on there instead. It looks, not only does it have the benefits of the 360 original, which is good enough, with better anti-aliasing, you also get forced 16x anisotropic filtering. So it's just, that is better. That's a better version of Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3. And then if you're like, but I want to play Metal Gear Solid 1, well, guess what? You can install DuckStation on your Xbox through the dev mode. You can I think you can do Dolphin. I know you can do Dolphin on there. You can get that stuff on your Xbox as well, and it's freaking great.
That's awesome, man.
So, they messed up. They dropped the ball. It's not good.
There's also the lack of games on the actual Switch cartridge.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That's even stupider. It doesn't. They don't even include the main games on here. It has Metal Gear 2 and 1, the MSX stuff or something on there. But the actual main games, they have to be downloaded. It's just a hunk
What's
of
the
waste.
point of that?
It's a waste of plastic.
Waste.
You may as well have made it all digital at that point. It's
Are
just
those
a huge
MSX
waste.
games even more than a megabyte? Seriously.
They're very, very tiny. So I suspect the thing that's been happening on Switch, and I hope that they change the cost structure for the cartridges for the next Switch, is that publishers, obviously, they don't want to spend more on a Switch version than the disc version, right? And if you go over 8 gigabytes on the card size, suddenly your cost to manufacture is way above doing a Blu-ray disc.
Right.
And I suspect it's literally just that issue right there, where they don't want to spend more than a Blu-ray disc on it, and so they cheap out and take the cheapest possible cartridge. And I think that's really unfair to the consumer.
Yeah, it is basically, this whole thing is a spectacular lack of ambition, a spectacular lack of investment, a spectacular lack of respect for the franchises that they're returning. It's just astonishing, and it's really actually upsetting because done right, all of these games would look great. So, and we've got examples of that, right? So, for example, DuckStation just shows how to handle a PlayStation 1 game on a more modern system, how to make it look really, really good. I mean, this wouldn't have been unknown to M2, so I'm assuming it must be some kind of budget restriction, which is certainly...
We know they could have done better, and they have with PS1 games. They've done high-res versions, they've done enhancements, they've done this stuff before.
Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, I mean, the big takeaway from Blue Point's work is that the quality of the original artwork is such that it looks great at higher resolutions.
It's beautiful.
So, the concept that you can't go beyond 720p on the latest generation of hardware or PC is a nonsense. So, it's just a complete disaster from top to bottom.
Another funny thing. In some of the games, when they would have a voiceover clip where it would identify buttons on the controller to press, like the kernel talking, would be press this button. I guess they updated that for PS360, I believe. So the Xbox and PlayStation versions have those voiceovers, but on Switch, they just turn off the voices for certain scenes like that. Like they'll be speaking, and suddenly it's just text, and then it goes back to speaking because they didn't want to record.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that's difficult, but still, there's like no actual like proper fallback for that, and it just feels really bad.
I mean, even the worst thing you could do is just use AI.
I know, and I hate to say it, but they should have done. They needed
literally.
To do
they should have just done that.
It just feels so cheap in that regard.
Yeah, it really is. It really is a profound disappointment. And, again, I would say the fact they didn't really seed with Ucode points out
another thing.
Knew it.
Oh my God, the European version, the disc version, if you buy the European version, the only version of Metal Gear Solid 1 on the disc is the freaking PAL version. And all the other versions need to be downloaded as language packs, which means it plays at 50 hertz. It's 50 hertz within a 60 hertz container. So it sucks.
That's awful. So bad.
I mean, not that I shouldn't even be upset because I'm not going to buy this. But it's not good enough to warrant that. But like, still, come on, guys, come on. What are you doing?